live on Facebook Live. That's Greg Pickle right there. I'm Dustin Hockensmith. It's a new frontier for us, Greg. We've been shooting these recruiting videos, but now with National Signing Day tomorrow, Wednesday, we want to talk about some Penn State recruiting in 2017. The first thing I want to do, we had a comment from Rick Dickinson on the Facebook page, Penn State Football on Penn Live, asking about recruiting in Maryland. So I want to touch on that. We're going to also talk about our instant impact picks and our sleeper picks in the class. So four different categories. But first, for Rick, I think Penn State in the Mid-Atlantic will be something that ebbs and flows. They've got such a large footprint in so many places. You're not looking at the end-all, be-all in Western Pennsylvania or New Jersey or Maryland or even Eastern Pennsylvania. I think you're going to see Penn State win some in those areas. They lose some in those areas. But overall, from class to class, Penn State's going to clean up more than anybody else in the Mid-Atlantic. I would pay more attention to the fact that they're doing really well in Virginia than I would be down on the fact that they're not doing as well in Maryland.
Right. Yeah, I think that what it comes down to is you see Maryland, and we've talked about this before, the new coach effect. Penn State had it when James Franklin got here. DJ Durkin has it now. He's going to get, for at least a year or two, more kids to stay home in Maryland because he's selling the program on the rise. He's selling to him and his coaching staff.
The new coach smell.
Yeah, exactly, are the ones that can get Maryland back to the top. So it's going to happen. I think that for Penn State, they've been able to pull what they can. Tariq Castro Field, obviously a big decision coming on National Signing Day tomorrow. He's a four-star corner out of Maryland they're going to try and get. But I think Virginia and Maryland, Penn State's done really well. They've been in a lot of recruitments. They maybe haven't landed all those guys. But for the most part, they've been able to stay in a lot of the recruitments, and I think that's been key.
Yeah, it's been key for them. And just looking at Maryland, we saw with James Franklin at Penn State that the new coach smell does wear off. At some point in time, you got to produce some results. Maryland's going to run into this thing. They're going to run into that middle ground where they have to start producing. We'll see if they can or not. It certainly looks good, I guess, so far. We also wanted to cover our instant impact picks, one on offense, one on defense. It's something you'll see a little bit later in the week or maybe next week on Penn Live. But in this class, I don't know about instant impact so much. I don't know about instant impact on offense for sure. Penn State is at this place where they're so full on depth that it's hard to project a lot of freshmen. For me, looking at offense, I do like Mac Hippenhammer. Yeah. I think he's the most return-centric wide receiver. He's the best return candidate in this class, and I think that's a big priority in this class. So at the very least, I don't think you'll see him maybe break the depth chart at wide receiver, but I like for him to throw his hat in the ring on the punt return team.
Yeah, I think that when you look at it is you're not going to probably see these guys do a whole lot on offense. Maybe, though, you get a guy like Journey Brown or a guy like KJ Hamler, if he's healthy, in that Brandon Polk kind of role as a freshman. Yeah. Of course, Brandon Polk is back off a red shirt. So, but if you're going to use a guy just in the kick return phase, you're going to have to use him in the offense at least a little bit, I think, to justify using him. Granted, I think many would agree that Penn State might as well burn a red shirt just for the added benefit of an explosive returner, because as we've seen, they've had trouble finding a guy that can consistently catch the ball and break a big return. So I think that's sort of what you look for on the offensive side of the ball. I agree that I don't know with the way the depth is if there's going to be a whole lot of guys that are able to jump in and play right away. Just from a depth standpoint, a number standpoint, it doesn't make sense, especially at wide receiver where the numbers sort of get a little hairy pretty quickly moving forward after the next couple of years. So Hippenhammer's a good pick. I think you watch for Journey Brown as well. It's legit speed he has, and he could be used any number of ways.
For the same reasoning, I think. I think special teams value is there. I think they have really tangible skills that can help the Penn State offense right away. You look at the center position as one that I want to watch and see what happens there. Michael Menon, who redshirted, a really highly talented guy, looks like the favorite to start at center. If things happen there, like things happened at linebacker last year, you could see a guy like Mike Miranda have his redshirt pulled. But we'll see. I wouldn't count on that. Let's look at defense, where I think there's one pretty consensus pick here. Lamont Wade is really college ready. He's 5'9", 190 pounds. He can run with wide receivers as a cornerback. He's listed as a cornerback. They told him he can play safety. I wouldn't be shocked if in sub packages you see him at linebacker. It wouldn't be a surprise to see him get the ball on offense or in special teams as well. So I think Lamont Wade is an obvious choice here, but just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's wrong. Lamont Wade will be pretty ready to go, I think, this summer.
Yeah, I think most would be shocked if he didn't see the field. And I think another guy that a lot of us are watching is Braylon Fajon-Walden, another January enrollee, a guy that Brent probably loves. He's able to maybe play linebacker, maybe play safety. He's another guy that you'd be hard-pressed to see on the sidelines for the entire 2017 season. It's not a guarantee that we'll see his red shirt pulled. Think about it in the past. Many thought Michael Menon was a surefire bet to play in 2016. He looked physically ready when he got here. He was well trained in high school to play right away. Penn State did the discipline thing and didn't play him, so they get 4 more years out of him at a higher level than what he came in. So Faison Wong could fall into that same boat. But he's a guy to watch. There's no question about it. He's another one in that sort of consensus boat. Man, it's quite as consensus as Lamont Wade, but pretty close.
You have to pick a position with Faison Wong. If they have eyes on him playing in 2017, is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? 6'1", 200 he came in. He could be either thing, depending. We see a question from Donald about flipping the 2 Georgia commits. I think Mark Webb, I wouldn't rule that out yet. DeAndre Swift, it looks like that ship has sailed. But Mark Webb, his dad just talked to a reporter here at PennLive and didn't close the door on Penn State, but I personally would be surprised if he flips from Georgia. For me, I would say 85% to 15% Georgia to Penn State.
Same boat with that. I think that there's a chance Penn State has the very edge of its toe in the door still, and who knows what could happen over the next 26 hours or so. He hasn't set a time for when he wants to fax in his national letter of intent to Georgia, or, of course, now with Penn State having a foot in the door to Penn State. I don't want to get people too excited, though. I'm pretty sure I agree with you that it's 85-15, maybe even 90-10, or maybe it's 99-1. It's really hard to get a read on this one.
Could be 98.5, 1.5,
Sure,
or 97 3/4 and 2 1/4.
I mean, if we're going to get into fractions, we might
let's
as well.
Let's go with
Let's just go the whole way down that rabbit hole. I think that probably more than anything, though, it's Georgia, but we'll see.
Just to close the discussion on the instant impact, Ellis Brooks is another guy you got to watch because at 6'2", 230, he looks like a college linebacker right now. If they have problems, they're not deep at linebacker. We know that already. But if they have injury problems at all, you could see him cycle in there behind maybe Jason Kabinda in the middle. The other same with center on offense. You got to be making calls there. So it's not ideal to have a freshman there. But like we saw with Penn State last year, they didn't have much of a choice at linebacker. Let's look at offense again, a sleeper, maybe a guy who's a little bit underrated. I think there's ample players to choose from here. I'm going with KJ Hamler because I feel like if he would have played his senior season, he got hurt at IMG Academy before the season started. If he would have played that year, we would have been talking about his recruitment completely differently. He chose Penn State over Oregon and Michigan State, I believe. He's really electric. He and Mac Hippenhammer are prototypes for that slot wide receiver / return guy. That's what they were targeting in this class. It seems pretty clear. Hamler is pretty electric, though. I like him. I don't know about 2017 because he's still got to recover from that knee, but beyond that, he could be an electric guy in return and in the slot.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, the thing with the guy that has an ACL injury, and Joe Moorhead, talked about this before the Rose Bowl when asked about it. He said that he proved everything he needed to prove to us to make sure we wanted to offer him a scholarship before he was hurt and then after he was hurt, because he's a guy that, obviously hit the rehab hard. He did a lot of the things off the field right. So he's a really interesting guy in this class, and certainly I think Penn State probably would have had more to fend off if he did play a full senior season, if he wasn't hurt. I think he could go a couple different ways here. Mike Miranda's the one that I look at. I think that people were maybe sleeping on him a little bit as a junior, and there were some questions about his size and his film. All intents and purposes, you watch his senior film, it's almost like a totally different kid. It really is. And I think the way you wrote it earlier this week was that he won't stop until he puts his opponent in the dirt. And that's the kind of guy he is. Matt Limegrover, I was really excited to get him in the program. So I think that what you'll see from Mike Miranda is a pretty steady growth to a guy that's reliable inside. It's not going to be year one. I don't think there's any question about that. Is it out of the question? No, you're right about the center thing. But I think more often than not, you're a guy like that who was still maybe a little bit on the undersized side coming in. He hasn't had a whole lot of work at center. A little bit, no game action in high school, though. Probably not year one, but he's a real interesting candidate to be the guy that maybe most forgot about, especially once they saw C.J. Thorpe at the Under Armour game. It's like, whoa, that kid's big. But a guy that can make an impact down the road.
Yeah, I think he proved himself athletically as much as anything as a senior. That was the real thing that changed in his tape, is that athletically he looked a lot better. He looked a lot more college ready than he did. On the defensive side, I think there's a bunch of names also. You mentioned Braylon Faison Walden. He was a 3-star. I've talked about this before, that if you don't fall into a certain box and check off 6'3", 225, you're not going to be highly rated as a linebacker. That's just how it goes. So at 6'1", 200, because you have to do some projection with his body, I think that kept some of these recruiting services from giving him that 4-star. But he's a really good football player. I don't care whether he's a safety or a linebacker. My pick, though, to go all the way around, Damian Barber from Harrisburg is 6'3", is about 245 pounds. I think just projecting here and guessing that he's your next defensive end, a defensive tackle, play that 3 technique. He's going to grow into that frame. His frame is nice and big and athletic. He moves well. At 6'3" and almost 250 pounds now, I don't think it's hard to see him as a sophomore, a redshirt sophomore, checking in at 290 pounds and causing some chaos from the inside as opposed to the outside.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy, too, and I think people forget that he's in this class because he's been committed for so long. He's not one of those guys that went on visits or caused any sort of, drama or really reason to talk about him during his senior season other than the fact that you'd see him and he had good stats, good games, playing with Micah Parsons and whatnot against some pretty good competition. He's a good pick. I think you're right that he's a guy that it's going to move to the top of the line, either at end or tackle, probably a tackle sooner rather than later. The one guy I think that people are in that same mold, and he's a 4-star, so it's not maybe exactly the same comparison, but Jonathan Sutherland's a guy that, he started playing football in Canada, went to Virginia, and here's a guy that was able to sort of mold his game from what was a little bit different in Canada to what was very much, the American game, of course, at the high school in Virginia. And he hits people. He thumps. Penn State was fighting off a number of schools for him, and they get him in this class. And I'm not convinced he couldn't be a year 1 guy too. I think that that he's not a year 1 guy. Rather, I think he could make an immediate impact. It's going to come down to the weight for him. That's what we'll have to wait and see on. He's going to have to add the weight to play in the Big Ten. If he's able to do that, the sooner he does, the sooner you'll see him on the field. Maybe not this year, certainly next year.
I love his game. He looks like a little bit smaller version of Marcus Allen. Wants to play the same way as Marcus Allen.
Yeah.
I want to see him get a little bit better when the ball's in the air. That's one thing an issue I've had with Marcus Allen is that there's not enough plays on the ball, a little bit too much headhunting, so to speak. Sutherland's the same way. Let's just wrap this up. We got a question from Dale about Tariq Castro-Fields. It's a great question because he's going to announce, I guess it's tomorrow afternoon, signing day afternoon. Maryland and Penn State look like the two choices there. What do you think?
Yeah, 2 p.m. You can join us right here on Facebook Live for that announcement. We'll be back on, not Dustin and I, but
not us. Yeah,
probably a good thing. But it's real interesting because I was certain he was going to go to Penn State when he was set to announce a week ago Monday. He delayed that to National Signing Day, and obviously that's given Maryland time to creep back in. The going rate you're going to find out there right now is that Maryland is trending to be his leader. Whether that's the case or not, though, we don't know because Tariq Castro-Fields, while delaying his announcement, has not talked on the record to anybody or publicly either about his decision. So it's interesting. It's going to be real, one of the few times Penn State has real signing day drama with a 4-star prospect. You'd have to go to the archives to remember the last time that really happened on a big stage. I'm still going to stick with my pick that he goes to Penn State, but Maryland is certainly trending.
He'd be the 4th cornerback in the class. The other guys are all 5'10" or shorter. I like that dimension in the class. They've tried to do it in the previous classes too. So we'll see. One more question. I guess we'll keep going until questions stop. But Fred Hansard, instant impact for him. On one hand, Penn State goes so deep with its rotation. On the other, you got Kevin Givens. You've got Robert Windsor in there too. Parker Cothran does move on. So it's not out of the realm. I think strength-wise, size-wise, he definitely makes the grade and talented. He's so quick and powerful. It wouldn't be stunning. He does get there in the summertime. I would bet against it, but I don't think it's a crazy bet either.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a small chance, but I think what you have to look at is Penn State has some depth issues going forward because they were only able to land him in this class. It's noted if you follow recruiting, the defensive tackle, for whatever reason, Penn State has trouble landing them. They have had success moving guys from end to tackle. Those guys take time. I think with a Fred Hansard, you want to keep him, develop him, and make sure he's ready to go as a guy you can rely on in year 2 on campus. Sometimes that can be helped by putting those guys on the field in year 1. More often than not, you want to get him in the weight room, get him bigger, get him stronger. Florida liked him because of his size, though. They thought he was getting close to being college ready. So that's what we're going to have to wait and see when he gets to campus, how close he is to that, weight and height and frame and everything to be college ready.
Boy, I'm excited. We've actually got questions. We didn't think we were going to get any at all.
No.
Dale asked about the Georgia commits. We addressed that a little bit earlier in the video, but I think we'll do the percentage thing now. DeAndre Swift, 100%, in my opinion, to Georgia, 0 to Penn State. And with Mark Webb, there's a little bit of hope there. I put it at 85-15 Georgia. We also discussed 93 1/4 to 6 3/4. But the bottom line, we think Georgia for Mark Webb too. Donald asking about Micah Parsons, remaining a Penn State recruit. Flip a coin. I think they are the team to beat at this point, but he seems to be open to anything. He wants to experience everything that the recruiting experience has to offer him. I think he's a guy you'll see take all 5 of his official visits.
Yep.
He'll also be a guy who could come down to National Signing Day 2018. Also, Penn State will have some drama there. And really, the better the player that you're recruiting, the better the players, the more likely you are to have drama in your recruiting class. 2018 is where Penn State looks to be taking that step into absolutely elite, not top 15, but top 5, currently number 1 in that class. But with Parsons, well, I actually have no idea. We're going to be in for a little bit of a roller coaster ride with him.
Yeah, he likes to take visits. He likes to experience the process. And I know a lot of people get upset about that, but I don't really think there's anything wrong with it. We'll have to wait and see how things play out. Obviously, some schools that are of high interest of him have sort of jumped into the picture, so we'll wait and see. Right now, he's pretty solid to Penn State.
John has a question about Ricky Slade. Any chance he commits soon after he visited this past weekend? If we would have gone into last weekend, we would have asked that question. I would have thought it was crazy because he's a kid who reopened his recruitment. He did away with his top 5. Penn State is clearly in the mix there. I don't think he's visited anybody more than he has Penn State. Whether he's ready to actually make that pledge now, I'm not quite sure. I've been picking Ricky Slade to Penn State for a long time. I'm going to stick to that. It looks better today than it did last week at this time.
Yeah, no question. I mean, he tweeted stay tuned after his visit. I think a lot of people got revved up and thinking that meant he was going to commit right away.
These kids love the attention.
They do love the attention.
Even the really good kids. And I think if I were talented enough to be recruited, I would probably love the attention too.
No question. So he's a great kid, great player. He's the type of guy Penn State wants in its class as the sort of one running back that, you can hang your hat on. Justin Shorter, sort of like that as a receiver. Not to say they're only going to take 1 and 1 at those positions next year, but if you get Justin Shorter and Ricky Slade, those are your only 1 at each of those positions.
Yeah.
You did pretty good.
Yeah, you're doing okay. Ricky Slade reminds me of Miles Sanders. That's why I think that the pipeline is going to be there. Real quick, chance Penn State makes the playoffs next year. Boy, they got to back up what they did, and you see the attitude that they had. You saw that they never really quit on themselves. I think the second half surge thing is for real. I think the personality of the team, they've taken on James Franklin's personality. They've taken on Trace McSorley's personality. I don't think they're going to have a hard time adjusting to life with expectations because they already did that last year. I think they'll be better. That's just going to come down to, can you beat Michigan? Can you beat Ohio State? Can you beat Michigan State?
And there are 3 in a row. That's really what it comes down to me as well. And I think that as we get closer to the season, we'll get a better feel for where each of those 3 programs sit. They have a lot of replacing to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State returns a lot. That's probably the one thing it has in its favor at this point. But those games don't come until later in the season when everybody else has time to settle in. So.
One more question from Jake. We've gone on long enough. How many guys do we end up taking? We, meaning Penn State. At 19 now, I think they take Tariq Castro-Fields, but if it's not Castro-Fields, I don't know that it's anybody else. I think it's either they're at 19 or with him, they would go to 20.
There's only 2 guys we're still watching at this point. One's Corey Bolds, defensive tackle out of Paramus Catholic. I keep including him on the different boards and the things that we look at because he took an official visit route to Penn State. He hasn't committed anywhere yet. So I haven't heard anything or any reason to think that Penn State's really actively pursuing him, but uncommitted official visit, always going to keep him on the board. Peyton Hendershot, still no resolution with him, whether Penn State's going to offer him. It's a 3-star Indiana tight end committed to Indiana. If Penn State offers, I think they flip him. They still haven't made a decision on that.
And then it goes back to Mark Webb. We put the odds at 15%. You got to take him. And it doesn't matter where you're at numbers-wise. You have to find a way to take him. Thanks for joining us. Dale, by the way, agrees with us with Michigan State, Ohio State. It's not hard to agree with that. I guess we'll be doing this a little bit more often. This is a special occasion with National Signing Day, but if people are interested and we get a few questions, then maybe we'll come back to talk some Penn State recruiting here on the Penn State Football on Penn Live. If you're seeing this not on the Facebook page, go ahead and follow the Facebook page, like it, because you're going to end up loving it. So thanks for joining us. You'll see these videos that we talked about on Penn Live in some way, shape, or form. And happy National Signing Day to everybody.